Yes, Zen-Brain is back after a gap, but our website is up. So you may want to check that out by going to zenbrain.com or continue watching our videos on YouTube. You can also now listen to our podcasts on Spotify. So today we are talking about stress, burnout, becoming mentally and emotionally strong and how to do that. And of course, maximizing our potential. And how do we do that? Joining me all the way from Austin, Texas is Sal Celly, who's been in sales in the IT sector for over 3 decades, especially in North America, and now runs MaximizeU, where he coaches and trains corporates and individuals. So thank you, Sal, for being on Zen-Brain. Lovely to have you here.
Absolutely, Shruti. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, Sal, let's begin with stress. That's something most people aren't really able to pinpoint, right? What, according to you, is stress and what then is burnout?
Yeah, great question. The way I like to think about it, Shruti, is stress happens when you feel out of control and you feel that what you are facing is larger than your capability. That's when you feel that you are stressed. Now, it could be due to 2 reasons. It could be 2 factors. Things that how you react to a situation is in your control, but the external situation is not in your control. So the first thing is, and this has worked very well for me, and I hope others find it useful, is identify what is causing the stress. Is it in your control or is it not? First step. Secondly, if it is not in your control, then you can't do anything about it. So don't worry about it. If it is in your control, then how you react to it is how you can manage the stress.
Okay, that's interesting. A place where you feel completely out of control. What according to you, are things which are under control?
Well, things like how you react to stimulus. For example, if you're at work and one of your coworkers is rude to you. Now, that's not in your control. His rudeness is not in your control, but how you respond to the rudeness is in your control. Normal reaction is you may feel hurt, you may feel angry, you may want to retaliate. In most cases, that only worsens the situation. So maybe you give them some grace. Try to walk in their shoes for a minute. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're under a lot of stress, and that's why they reacted like that. So that's what I mean by what is in your control and how you respond to the stimulus.
So we've had several comments, Sal, talking about toxic environments that are causing stress. One would argue that it is not in your control. On the other hand, some people say that it is in your control. You can choose to get out of that environment, or you can talk about it to the higher ups. But usually in the comment section, we often find people talking about toxic work environments that they can do nothing about. Now, how does one deal with a toxic work environment?
It's a continuum. Okay, what do I mean by that? The first thing is, how bad is it? Is it an irritant or is it affecting you mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, physiologically? Only you can determine that. If you're not being able to sleep at night and you lost your appetite and you are withdrawn and you don't want to talk with others, you're isolating yourself, that's bad, right? So that's really impacting you. So then you need to take a call, okay? And you were right. Either you can change the situation by, if it's your boss that's causing the stress, maybe you talk to the boss, maybe you move to a different team, or you leave the company. I mean, your health and your well-being is most important. Nothing beats that. So if it gets to a point, you need to change your environment. And sometimes that is leaving your role, leaving your company and going elsewhere. I've done that. I had a situation where I had a terrible boss who would call me at 6 o'clock in the morning and demand me to do reports. I remember it was Mother's Day and I was out with my wife and kids, and he's calling me up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, telling me that where's the report and screaming at me. And I, at that point, made my decision that I'm going to leave this company, and I did. When one door closes, Shruti, many more open. And sometimes the discomfort prompts you to make a change. So don't avoid the discomfort. Don't resist the discomfort. Embrace it and take action and get to a better place.
Getting yourself out of a toxic work environment, toxic bosses. And again,
Yes.
this is something that keeps coming up. And we've been, sent emails about this. Perhaps there are a few privileged lot who can afford to get out without having something in their hand. But unfortunately, that's not the case for many people. Now, what if a person is stuck in a work environment which is toxic with a toxic boss? What does he or she do?
If for whatever reason you cannot move out and you cannot change your team and you're stuck with the boss that you have, change the way you react to the situation. Okay, and that's entirely in our control. I wrote my recent book, which is 86 Good Enough? Right? And there I talk about what is really important, where you need to take a stand and you need to be principled and you need to make sure that you get your way. And what is the other stuff that you let it go? The small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff. Okay? At the end of it, think about it like this. It's a job. It's not your life. You're not defined by your job. You're not defined by your boss. Don't give your boss so much control that they are responsible for the way you value yourself as a human being. We tend to make that mistake. So if I'm in a toxic situation, fine, compensate for it outside my work environment. For example, when I go home, I do things that give me happiness, that give me relaxation, to make up for the bad time at work, right? So that's one. What can you do? You can do hobbies. I like to garden. I like to relax, listen to music, work out, exercise. So you can do all that. Also, while you're at work, how you choose to react to the situation is entirely in your hands. So don't let it affect you. I know it's easier said than done, but it's about our perspective and our mindset, right? When you are at inner peace with yourself, Shruti, nobody can disturb that. Nobody.
Actually, I want to make a couple of points here. Personally speaking, I did undergo periods of stress, but then I realized that it was also a lot to do with how I was thinking about things, right? And so
Yes.
getting another perspective perhaps will enable you to get over that stress, that processing, which perhaps we weren't taught to do while growing up. Number two, talk about having some sort of a balance. Unfortunately, in most workspaces here in India, that's very rare to really have a balance between what you are as a person and not let work define you. Unfortunately, a lot of us have been defined by, forget about the work, our organizations. And number three, boundaries, Sal. Boundaries with boss. I mean, sometime in your life, you need to build those boundaries.
And Shruti, here, this is where faith comes into the picture, and spirituality, and having access to mentors and coaches that you can bounce things off. The worst thing you can do in a stressful situation is to self-isolate. That is the worst thing. So talk about it with somebody that you trust. Maybe somebody outside the organization, right? That's why it's so important to have mentors that you can reach out to and bounce things off. Number two, faith has such a key role to play in this, because if you try to control everything, you're going to set yourself up for disappointment. Rather, give the control to the power that is above us and do your best. When you have that mindset, suddenly the pressure is removed from you. You still do your best, but now you're not so linked to the outcome.
And even if you don't believe in a higher power, at least reach out to someone else.
And the best time to reach out to a mentor is not when you need them, right? You create those relationships long before you need them. And it's a two-way street. Right? I've been fortunate. I've mentored a lot of people, but I gain a lot of value from the mentee as well. It's not just me giving knowledge. It's also me learning from them and understanding from them, right? And that's where you got to broaden your horizons. You got to read. There's so much information out there. I know I went through a very tough time in my life when everything was going downhill. My work, my career, my relationships, my family, everything. I could have just kept quiet and kept absorbing it, but I didn't do that. I went to my church. I joined a real life group. I started sharing with a few people that I trust. And I did a book study. And I did this book called The Measure of a Man. And that opened my eyes. It may be different for other people, but bounce things off people that have your best interest in mind. And it's best if you are doing it with somebody that is outside your immediate situation.
And Sal, would you say that a few people are intimidated by mentors or reaching out to people who are much more senior to them to not hesitate? Because like you said, mentors also gain a lot from mentees.
Absolutely.
Try and reach out. What's the worst that can happen? They will say no. They wouldn't go out of the way to help.
Exactly.
What if they do? What if they do? Anyway, let's move on. So we've talked about stress a little bit. What are the signs that you should watch out for? When is it time to worry?
See, some stress is good. You don't want to eliminate all the stress,
right?
Because some of it is good. Too much of it is not good. So sometimes, when you have a deadline and you're under stress, you got to produce, you got to deliver, you got to get the project out, right? You got to get the report in. So that amount of stress is good because it's going to spur you into action. However, when it starts impacting your emotional, physical, or mental well-being, that's when you have to recognize. First, recognize. Number 2, act. And number 3, change your mindset. If you're not being able to sleep, that's a problem. If you're finding that you're being irritable when you're at home, when you come back from work, and you're very short, and your family is telling you what's going on with you, what's happening to you. We're noticing a change in your behavior. You don't like to do the things you used to. You don't want to meet the friends that we used to hang out with. You're becoming a person that nobody wants to hang around with. That is when you have to recognize that it has gone too far and you need to take action. Hopefully, it doesn't get to that point. And that's where you can do certain things. You can exercise. You don't need to go to the gym. You can exercise at home. You can go out in the fresh air. You can have balance. Most people make this mistake, Shruti. They only start doing these things when they are in a tough situation. Do it before so that when the tough situation comes, you don't fall into the mud.
That's the eternal challenge, I think. Just to mention here, Sal, stress causes chemical changes in our bodies as cortisol is released by the adrenal glands.
Absolutely.
That alters the way our immune system works. It affects our digestion, it affects our brain. And when the stress goes on for a very, very long time, it may even lead to mental health issues and physical illness and disease. In fact, we've done discussions on this, and I would request people who are watching this episode also to take a look at the chemical reactions in our body. But when does stress lead to a burnout, Sal?
I remember when I used to spiral into these major bouts of depression and anxiety and stress. It happened multiple times because nobody was treating the cause. They were treating the symptom. I used to lose a lot of weight because I couldn't eat. It was impacting my whole digestion system. My stomach would be out. I couldn't swallow anything. Some people, the reverse happens. They eat too much and then they start putting on a lot of weight. When the burnout happens is when you don't want to even get out of bed and you are so down, nothing gives you happiness anymore. And it's a terrible situation. I wouldn't wish that on my enemy, right? Because your kids notice it. It's like somebody literally has to force you to just get out of the house. That is a clear sign that that's burnout. I remember there was a time when I was in a high-powered, high-pressure enterprise sales, and I had to do QBRs, quarterly business reviews, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I couldn't think clearly. There's brain fog. Your thoughts are all muddled. Normally, you may be a very confident extrovert. After the stress and the burnout, now your whole personality changes. You become a huge introvert. You become nervous. You become underconfident. And people can see that when the stress affects who you are as a person. Sometimes you may not see it, the other people will, and they'll tell you. And don't say that everything is okay. Don't say that, because it isn't. So be vulnerable. People hide their vulnerability. They hide their weakness because they feel they don't want to expose themselves. The most effective leaders are the ones who are human and who are genuine and who are real. So be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. Ask for help. Talk to somebody outside. There's so much information out there, like what you're doing with Zen-Brain, or like what we are doing with MaximizeU. Be a grateful receiver to be a grateful giver.
Making yourself vulnerable, which is tough, especially in our society. We are often told to, man up if you're a man. As a often our vulnerability is held against us. So, a lot of women in the workforce also tend to become more aggressive because they don't want to be labeled as vulnerable. But burnout and depression, what is the difference?
So burnout can have different reactions to people. For me, it was depression. You may go towards alcohol or drugs or whatever else, right? These are all coping mechanisms that your body is trying to give you. When you're under burnout, depression is what? Depression is when the chemicals in your brain are not balanced. So that's why most people, you go to a psychiatrist. What does a psychiatrist do? They most of the time they give you medication, and some of those prescription drugs make you worse. I've gone through all of this. The key is to modify your behavior. That's where cognitive behavioral therapy comes in, and there's a science to it. Your thoughts and your feelings impact your behavior and your emotions, which in turn drive your actions. So if you want to change your actions and the outcome of your actions, change your thoughts. Your thoughts have power. And the other thing I want to mention here, Shruti, is you have 24 hours in the day. And I tell this to everybody if they say, oh, I don't have time to socialize, I don't have time to go for a walk. That's nonsense. And that's when you have to reprioritize what is important. Are you running behind the conspicuous symbols of success, the material possessions that are going to rust, rot, get robbed, and will get destroyed? Or are you running after the things that are more important in your life, your relationships, your family, your spouse, your kids? Those are the things that matter. What are people going to remember about how you impacted them and how you changed their lives? Those are the things that matter.
And that really leads me to the next point, which is mental strength. How does one inculcate mental strength to avoid getting into that spiral?
At least half an hour out of the 24 hours, you have to do what makes you happy. It's like you're filling your emotional cup. Whether that is listening to music or going for a walk or playing a sport or watching a movie or reading a book, that's number one. Number two, it starts from the food that you take into your body. I like to draw an analogy with a farmer. The farmer sows seeds. The quality of the harvest is dependent on the quality of the seeds they sow in the ground and the care they take to fertilize it, to nourish it, to give water to it, to give sunlight, etc. It's the same thing. What you put into your body, the food that you eat, the thoughts that you think, the stimuli that you absorb is going to directly impact your feelings, your emotions, and your thought. The gut-brain connection is very strong. Be cognizant of what you're eating. Focus on every day spending time on what gives you happiness. And number three, social relationships. Those are so critical. Shruti, there was a survey done where they interviewed people that lived to a very long life, 89, 90, 92. And they found out that the common theme in all those people was that they had 2 or 3 amazing friends that they used to talk to, laugh with, do life with, have fun. And that was the key. The quality of your social relationships directly impact your balance and give you mental strength. You may not see it, but it's true.
Well,
right?
Sal, these things come or occur to you much later in life, unfortunately. But if there's someone in their 20s, perhaps in their early 30s, struggling with that, it is kind of difficult to accept that, in life, all these things are not important. Work is not that important. How do you mentor somebody who's in their late 20s?
If you have recognized that you want help, then accept that the other person who's telling you stuff is more experienced, has seen what you are going through, has come out of it stronger on the other side, and do what they are telling you. What have you got to lose? You're not anyway getting better on your own. So try this. There are no guarantees in life, but at least keep an open mind. Sometimes self-awareness is the first step. So do you truly know yourself? That's where the assessments come in. Take the time to get to know yourself better. What are some of your inclinations? Are you prone to getting stressed? Some people can handle stress better than others. Why? Because they are wired differently. And that's where knowing yourself comes in. And that's why you should start by taking an assessment. There are many different assessments out there where you get to know yourself better. And then you understand, okay, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses. Now you can either play on your strengths, or you can try to improve on your weaknesses, or like people say, if you have a weak ankle, don't try to run 100-meter sprint. Do something different.
Stress affects different people in different ways. And for many people, as you mentioned, it's good stress. It eggs them on. In fact, some people thrive in it.
Yes.
Impacts me would be different from how stress impacts you. And in fact, people who have gone through tremendous stress while growing up, would you agree, are more prone to stress?
The past triggers certain emotions in your mind, which may not be relevant. The current present situation may be totally different from the past, but you have a bias, right? Because of what you went through in the past, you are viewing everything with purple tinted glasses, right? And that's why your view of the world is colored by your experiences from the past. And that's why you need somebody that is from the outside to tell you that, hey, relax, you're overreacting. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was so worried. I thought I was going to get fired by my job. Okay. Why? Because my boss was asking me for my numbers. And I called up Laura. This is 20 years ago, right? And I called her up on the phone and I told her, honey, I think I'm going to get fired. And she said, why? Why are you saying that? Well, because they asked me for my numbers. And she said, no, don't worry. The same evening, I was awarded for the best salesperson. And that is why they were asking me for my numbers, not because they were going to fire me. This is what I mean by when you have blinders on. Everything looks black to you, but it's not.
And also, once more, revisiting the past and being affected by it, do remember that it was a child's mind looking at a situation, and now you're an adult and things can be interpreted. In fact, even your past can be re-represented to yourself. And
Absolutely.
it's sometimes important to do that, especially where stress triggers are concerned.
Yeah, and the other thing I have found very helpful, Shruti, is face your fears. Don't hide from them. For years, I felt that, oh my God, if I lose my job, this will happen, that will happen. Write it down on paper. What is the worst that is going to happen? And then when you write it down and you're looking at it, in most cases, that worst is not as bad as you think it's going to be. So I lose my job. So what? Okay, we won't be able to pay our bills. So what? We may lose our house. We may need to move to a smaller house. So what? Maybe you don't need to be a high-flying corporate executive jet-setting across the world. Why? Because there's a cost to that. When the cost of your success becomes too high, you start losing out on your kids' games. You start impacting the relationship with your kids. You start impacting the relationship with your friends. Who cares how much money you have? You're going to be sitting having dinner all alone. For years, I've chased all the wrong things, right? The title, the job, the career. I was selfish. I put my interest first above everybody else. And I wasn't happy. When I put myself second and other people first, that's when good things started happening. It's good to have aspirations, but what are you shooting for? Are those the right things? That is the key.
So we spoke about mental strength. What about emotional strength? A note that I've got from a 19-year-old boy called Abhiroop. And he sent us this question, and it says, how does one control one's emotion at this age?
The emotion is a trigger. It is a response to a stimulus. If something is hot and I touch that hot thing, I'm going to get burnt. When you change the way you react, your emotion will change. I'm talking to my boss, and my boss gives me negative feedback. Now, my first response is, no, I didn't do that. So and so did it. It wasn't my fault. I start defending myself, right? That why? Because my emotion is I'm under attack. So when you're under attack, what is the first response? You attack back. Instead of doing that, I just keep quiet and I just listen. I listen with the intent to understand, not with the intent to react. And when I do that, now my emotion is much more balanced and I'm much more calm. So if you want to change your emotion and you want to control your emotion, react to the situation differently. So typical emotions are what? Anger, jealousy, greed, anxiety, stress, depression, flight or fright. So when you have an external stimulus, whatever that is, it causes a ripple effect, right? It's like a lake is all still. Suddenly you take a stone and you throw it in the lake. Not only does it cause an immediate effect where the stone landed, but it ripples throughout the lake. Compartmentalize things. Okay, my boss gave me negative feedback. Okay, got it. I'll change my behavior. When you compartmentalize things, you don't blow them out of proportion. Why do we feel emotional? Because we blow things out of proportion. What I would tell that 19-year-old boy who asked that question is, try to change the way you react to the situation.
Also, Sal, wouldn't you agree at 19, your brain is still evolving? There are hormones at play. Physiologically, you're in a state of flux. So this is very common at that age. The pressure of performance at school, whether it is in college, whether it's higher studies, whatever it is. Also the pressure that men face, we often don't talk about too much, to just be extraordinary and to take the entire family along. So all these pressures are pressures. But at the same time, your health, like you said, health is most important.
Yeah, Mike Tyson had an amazing quote, and he said, everybody has a plan till you get punched in the face. You are going to get punched in the face. It's okay. You're going to get knocked down. Life is going to knock you down. People are going to knock you down. It's okay. Accept it. The question is not how many times you get knocked down and how many times you're lying flat on the mat. The question is how many times you get back up. The other thing is stop comparing yourself with others. Comparison kills contentment. It's not about who's better than you. It's are you improving compared to who you were before? Change the mindset, right?
It all boils down to that, doesn't it, Sal?
And forgiveness has great power. The most important forgiveness you can do is to forgive yourself. Because we have many times, and these are high achievers, they hold themselves to such a high standard that they are going to falter and then they are going to get disappointed. But it's okay. It's okay. We are going to make mistakes. Forgive yourself. If you make no mistakes, that means you're not growing. You're not pushing yourself.
But would you say a lot of the stress comes from this idea of perfection that we have in our heads, right? That we want to.
Yes.
Most of the stress comes from there?
It's 100% true. Perfection is overrated. The cost of moving from 86 to 100 far exceeds the benefit. So 86 is good enough. So understand where you need to go all out and where you don't. If you try to go all out in every situation, you're going to get depleted.
And that leads me to the final question, really. You speak about maximizing potential. That's what you specialize in. How do we all maximize our potential?
Well, the first thing is to understand your starting point. We all have a different starting point. The second step is to understand where your end point is. Once you know those two things, then we can chalk out a plan to get you from your starting point to your desired destination. And that you can do through many different ways. You can invest in yourself, you can learn, you can coach, you can get a mentor. We are unique as our fingerprint. There's no two people alike. So their growth journeys are not going to be similar. So why should you follow another person's formula when they are a different person to you?
Number one, know what your starting point is. Number two, know what your end point is. What if you don't know your end point? I mean, I can speak from experience. I was one of those who had goals, and then life throws things at you, and you embrace the unpredictability of this life. And now you just flow along. And mindfulness never made sense to me earlier, and now it does. And
Yes.
a concept called being and living in the moment that you want to
Yes.
relish, that you want to soak in, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
never really embraced in the past because you were so busy. You were so busy
Yes.
doing. But I read somewhere, we're not human doings, we are human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. So here's the other thing. Not every movement equals speed. You may be very busy. You may be all the time doing things, but you're still getting nowhere. Everybody says, think big, shoot for the moon and the stars, and you'll land somewhere. That's okay, but also be a little realistic. And that's where the role of a coach or a mentor comes in. And it doesn't have to be a formal thing. It can be anybody you trust, and you call them and you say, hey, am I being unreasonable that I want to do this? What do you think? And if the person is truly vested in your success, they're going to give you their honest opinion.
Sal, the other
right?
problem that we have, it's a generational thing. We hear about, of course, you can achieve the impossible, but there has to be that much of work that is put in. Unfortunately, just thinking about it and dreaming it and, these affirmations, but you have to put the hard work in.
The younger generation are looking for shortcuts and quick fixes. The best goals and the plans and the strategies are useless without action. Your say-do ratio needs to be high. Otherwise, you lose credibility with people.
I love what you said about the say-do ratio that has to be high. You've made such pertinent points. Nutrition, exercise, very, very important for overcoming any sort of stress. Life is going to be tough. Becoming mentally strong, becoming emotionally strong. And of course, to stop comparing ourselves and become more self-aware.
I just read a story about Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think he's in his 70s now. And he still goes to the same gym, Gold's Gym in California, which he went to since 1968. Of course, now he doesn't do all the stuff he used to, but he goes there. One of the guys interviewed him and he asked him, why do you still do this? And he says, going to the gym for me is now survival. It's keeping what I have. I do less weights, I do less reps, but I still do enough to maintain and to keep it going. Now, at the age of 70, if he can do that, then that should be a lesson for us to keep on going, to keep striving. The last thing I would say, Shruti, is at the end of the day, we are all wanting happiness. That is the end goal. You can start achieving that today.
And I think COVID, the pandemic itself, has reiterated everything that we've spoken about. Prioritize, balancing, really putting your focus into things that really matter. But somewhere along the way, you need to set boundaries for everyone else. If you don't set it, someone else will, right?
Exactly. Don't be afraid to say no. Push back on unreasonable demands. We have been brought up in a culture where we want to say yes to everything. No, say no. It's okay to say no. Be comfortable in saying no. Yeah, and Shruti, I'm very much open and happy if there are any folks that want to have a further conversation or a discussion. You have my email address. Feel free to share that with them. Thank you for getting me and giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with your listeners and your viewers.
Thank you, Sal, for sharing your thoughts. Very insightful. And, I don't know whether you made that mistake offering yourself up as a mentor, because I'm signing up.
Yeah, most definitely. Happy to, Shruti.
Lovely talking to you, Sal. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Of course. Thank you so much, Shruti.